Think whispering on the bank makes you a fishing ninja. Think again. What if I told you that the fish knew you were there 10 minutes before you even baited your hook? Today, we are talking about a harsh reality. The plastic rattle of your tackle box is echoing underwater like a dinner bell for predators to run away. I am going to show you why you are ruining your chances before the sun even comes up. Fixing this one massive mistake will completely change everything about your catch rate. Do you really believe fish cannot hear you drop a pair of pliers on the dirt? Drop a comment right now if you think fish are deaf to what happens on the land. For generations, our grandfathers told us to shut up while fishing. We all remember sitting on the shore as kids, barely breathing because the old man said talking scares the fish. But here is the funny and tragic part. They would tell us to be quiet and then loudly slam a metal cooler shut or dig violently through a plastic tackle box. We have carried these exact same habits for decades. We think that as long as our mouths are shut, the underwater world is perfectly peaceful. But water is an absolute master conductor of sound. Why do millions of guys do the exact same thing every single weekend? They sit in silence but make an absolute racket with their physical gear. Then they scratch their heads and wonder why the bite is completely dead. It is time to break that old cycle today. Let us set the scene. Picture this in your mind. It is a beautiful foggy morning on the water. You woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You drove 20 miles out of town to find the absolute perfect fishing spot. The water is completely still, shining like a giant mirror. You finally arrive at the bank and you think you are completely stealthy. You set your heavy gear down. You take a deep breath of that crisp, fresh air. You feel like a true predator, ready to conquer the lake. But right as you set your large plastic tackle box down on the hard gravel, you hear that familiar crunch. Then you reach down and pop the latches. They snap open with a sharp plastic click, and you might think absolutely nothing of it because it sounds completely normal to human ears. But you have just sent a massive acoustic shockwave straight down into the water. We are taught by our grandfathers to enjoy the silence of the morning, but we completely ignore the loud mechanical noises we make. You are standing there, whispering to your buddy so you do not scare the fish, but your plastic gear is practically screaming at the top of its lungs. The fish sitting in the shallows 20 yards away just felt a tremor that screamed danger. Your perfect quiet morning setup just became a massive warning siren for every single fish in the area. Now let us talk about the science of sound. We need to break down how sound actually works, because this is where the old-timers got it completely wrong. When you speak out loud on the bank, the sound waves travel through the air. Most of that acoustic energy simply bounces right off the surface of the water. That is exactly why talking in a normal voice does not really matter as much as people think. But when you create a hard, physical vibration against the ground, it is an entirely different story. Sound travels through water nearly 5 times faster than it does through the open air. It also travels much further without losing its dangerous energy. When you rattle your hard tackle box, drop a heavy lead weight, or stomp your heavy boots on the rocks, those vibrations go straight through the solid earth. They travel directly into the water column. It is exactly like banging a metal wrench on a hollow steel pipe. The energy has nowhere to go but out into the lake. So while you think that snapping a plastic latch is just a tiny noise, underwater it sounds like a massive firecracker going off. The physics of water make it a perfect amplifier for every single clumsy move you make on the shore. To grasp this, look at the biology of the fish. You have to truly understand the incredible anatomy of the fish you are trying to catch. Fish do not have outer ears on the sides of their heads like humans do. This is exactly why your grandfather probably thought they were deaf to outside noises. But they possess an inner ear structure that is incredibly sensitive to low-frequency sounds. More importantly, they have what is called a lateral line. The lateral line is a complex series of sensory organs running completely down the side of their bodies. This specific organ detects tiny changes in water pressure and subtle vibrations. It is basically an advanced biological radar system designed solely to keep them alive. When a hungry predator approaches, the lateral line feels the water push. When you drop a pair of heavy pliers on the bank, the ground shakes, the water vibrates, and the fish feels it directly inside their own body. They do not just hear the sound, they physically feel the unnatural vibration of your plastic tackle trays clicking together. You are triggering their deepest survival instincts without even realizing it. They are genetically wired to flee from any unnatural mechanical vibrations. Focus on the exact noise of your gear. Think deeply about the exact sound a hard plastic tackle box makes. You know this exact sound perfectly. You pop open the main latch with a loud, sharp snap. Then you quickly fold back the lid. Inside you have 3 or 4 plastic trays stacked right on top of each other. You slide one out. The rough plastic scrapes loudly against plastic. Inside that tray, you have dozens of hard plastic crankbaits, metal spoons, and heavy lead jigs. Every single time you shift that box, hundreds of sharp metal hooks are scratching against hard plastic dividers. To a fish, there is absolutely nothing in raw nature that sounds like that. Natural sounds underwater are incredibly soft and rhythmic. A small baitfish splashing, a crawfish lightly clicking its claws, a smooth rock tumbling in the current. These are purely organic noises. The high-pitched, sharp acoustic scrape of a plastic tackle box is completely alien to their natural environment. When a wary bass or a smart carp hears that natural mechanical scraping, they do not stick around to see what is making the noise. They immediately associate that sharp frequency with a deadly threat. You are essentially broadcasting a loud radio signal that says a clumsy predator is here. We must also address how you move. We simply cannot talk about your noisy gear without talking about how you actually move around it. Most guys walk down to the fishing bank wearing very heavy boots. They march right up to the water edge like they are taking a casual walk on a concrete sidewalk. Every single step you take sends a massive, heavy thud right through the dirt. If you are fishing on a hollow, undercut bank, a soft, muddy shore, or a hard, rocky outcrop, those heavy thuds are instantly amplified. Now combine those heavy footsteps with a guy who keeps walking back and forth to his tackle box. You cast your line, you get frustrated, you reel in, and you stomp 5 yards back to your gear. You frantically rummage through your hard plastic trays, making a massive scraping racket. Then you stomp right back to the water edge. You are deliberately creating a continuous rhythmic rhythm of warning signals. The fish out there in the deep water might not care, but the actively feeding fish in the shallows are long gone. The big, incredibly smart fish that cruise the shorelines looking for an easy meal are incredibly spooky. By the time you finally get your new lure tied on and cast it out, you are casting into a complete dead zone. Let us trace the path of the sound wave. We need to break down exactly what happens the exact moment that noise is made. Imagine you are standing about 10 feet back from the water. You accidentally kick your heavy tackle box. The hard plastic hits a solid rock. That sharp physical impact sends a strong kinetic energy wave straight down into the deep soil. The solid soil carries that vibration horizontally straight towards the bank. When the fast vibration reaches the water edge, it transfers flawlessly right into the liquid. Water molecules are packed very tightly together, which is exactly why sound pushes through them so incredibly efficiently. The invisible wave expands outward in a massive, perfect circle. It is exactly like dropping a large boulder into a glass-smooth pond, except this wave is totally invisible to your eyes. It rapidly travels along the bottom structure, bouncing sharply off rocks and sunken logs. If a fish is sitting quietly behind a stump 30 yards away, waiting patiently to ambush a minnow, that invisible wave hits them instantly. They immediately feel the sharp shock of the vibration. Their lateral line registers a major anomaly. Their survival instinct kicks in and they quickly slide away into the deeper, much safer water. All of this happens in the blink of an eye. It is time to shatter the myth of silent water. There is this deeply rooted myth in the fishing community that what happens on land strictly stays on land. I hear older guys say it all the time. They truly think the surface of the water acts like some kind of impenetrable magic shield, and they honestly believe that as long as they do not actually splash the water with their boots, they are completely invisible. This is exactly why so many bank anglers struggle to catch big fish close to the shore. They will constantly cast their bait 50 or 60 yards out into the absolute middle of the lake. They are completely ignoring the incredibly fertile, shallow water right at their very feet. They ignore the shallows because they have unconsciously spooked every single fish in that zone before they even started fishing. If you actually sat down silently for 20 minutes without moving a single muscle, you would be absolutely amazed at how many fish swim right up to the literal edge of the bank. But the exact moment you reach over and pop open that creaky, loudly rattling tackle box, those fish totally vanish. The magical sound barrier simply does not exist. The solid ground and the liquid water are deeply connected. Imagine dropping your tools on the bank. Let us picture another classic scenario that happens to every single one of us on the water. You are actively retying a bottom rig. You have your fishing rod tightly tucked under your arm. You are holding your thin line in one hand and a shiny new hook in the other hand. You urgently need your metal pliers to crimp a weight or cut the line. You reach down, fumble blindly with your cold fingers, and the heavy metal pliers slip. They hit the hard gravel bank with a loud, ringing metallic clank. You probably just mutter a curse word under your breath, bend over, and pick them up. But let us look at it directly from the perspective of a big, wary trout or a giant carp cruising right near the bank. That ringing metallic clank is an absolute acoustic nightmare. It is very high-pitched, it is very heavy, and it is incredibly sudden. It sharply cuts through the natural hum of the underwater world like a sharp knife. The fish does not just hear it with its inner ear, it physically feels the sudden, sharp spike in sound pressure. That single drop of a tool just totally ruined the fishing spot for at least an hour. You can cast your perfectly rigged bait right on their nose, but their stress hormones are already totally elevated. Understand that not all fish are the same. It is incredibly important to understand that not all fish actually process these noises the exact same way. Some specific species are naturally more tolerant, while others are incredibly sensitive to ground vibration. Take carp and catfish for a prime example. These specific fish are essentially biological vacuum cleaners. They rely heavily on their advanced senses to find food in very murky water. Their hearing and lateral line systems are finely tuned to detect the absolute tiniest movements on the muddy bottom. When you loudly rattle a tackle box full of heavy lead weights, a carp perceives it as a massive, life-threatening danger. Bass are highly predatory, so they are naturally somewhat curious, but a big old bass did not get huge by being stupid. A young, totally dumb bass might actually swim over to investigate a strange noise. But a trophy-sized fish absolutely knows better. Trophy fish have happily survived years of dodging predators and terrible anglers. They know exactly what human footsteps and rattling plastic sound like. Trout are famously skittish. A sudden shadow falling across the water or a single snapped twig on the bank is enough to send a trout hiding under a solid rock for the rest of the entire day. Let us look at specific reactions. Let us dive much deeper into how specific fish actually react when they hear you loudly fumbling with your fishing gear. When a massive largemouth bass is resting quietly under some green lily pads right near the shore, it is in a focused ambush posture. It is totally relaxed, but ready to aggressively explode on a passing frog or a baitfish. Then, from the nearby bank, comes the sharp, scraping sound of a plastic tackle box sliding across the dry dirt. This is quickly followed by the loud clatter of metal treble hooks. The bass does not immediately swim away in a blind panic. Instead, it goes on total high alert. Its sharp fins flare out. It completely stops looking for food and starts looking solely for danger. The feeding window slams totally shut. If you cast your expensive lure right then, the bass will likely just watch it sink or slowly back away into the weeds. On the other hand, if you accidentally spook a large school of carp, the reaction is incredibly violent. You will literally see mud stirring up rapidly in the shallows as they bolt toward deep water in an absolute blind panic. One noisy mistake from you creates a massive chain reaction. Think back to the old metal boxes. Let us take a quick trip down memory lane for a minute. Think about the old school metal tackle boxes our fathers and grandfathers used to proudly carry. Those heavy, folding metal boxes were practically loud musical instruments. Every single time you opened them up, the metal cantilever trays would loudly squeak and grind. If you accidentally dropped a heavy lead sinker inside, it sounded exactly like a loud church bell ringing across the entire valley. We eventually modernized our gear and moved to plastic boxes, falsely thinking we were getting much stealthier. But the absolute truth is, hard plastic is almost just as terrible. Hard plastics transmit sharp, high-frequency vibrations very efficiently. When you have a large, hard plastic box filled with smaller, hard plastic boxes, you have accidentally created a massive echo chamber. Every little movement you make is greatly amplified. We laugh at the old rusty metal boxes, but our modern storage solutions are still completely failing us in the stealth department. We buy highly expensive fluorocarbon line to be totally invisible to the fish's eyes, but we completely ignore the glaring fact that we are practically deafening them with our loud storage containers. Consider the massive blast radius. You might be quietly thinking to yourself that this only matters for the water directly at your own feet. You might think, I am casting 30 yards out, so my tackle box noise does not matter at all. This is a massive, costly miscalculation. Water is an incredibly dense, heavy medium. Sound does not just simply stop after a few short feet. It travels much further and much faster than you can easily comprehend. When you loudly rip open a sticky Velcro bag or furiously smash a plastic lid shut, that exact sound wave can easily travel hundreds of feet underwater. This depends heavily on the bottom composition and the total water depth. You are not just simply spooking the fish directly at your boots. You are aggressively sending a loud warning pulse 50 yards out into the open lake. Any fish currently swimming within that large radius becomes instantly much more cautious. They might not swim away completely, but their natural behavior deeply changes. They fully stop roaming and loudly tuck tight to thick cover. They stop actively hunting and quickly switch to a highly defensive mindset. By being noisy on the bank, you have essentially put every fish within casting distance into lockdown. Think about the endless rummaging. One of the absolute worst habits modern fishermen have is the endless noisy rummaging. You get down to the bank, you carefully tie on a fresh lure, and you cast a few times. Nothing happens. So what exactly do? You walk back to the tackle box. You loudly pull out a tray of crankbaits. The sharp treble hooks are all tangled tightly together. You spend 3 full minutes aggressively shaking the plastic tray pulling angrily at the lures. You are making an absolute massive racket of clicking metal and scratching plastic. You finally rip the lure free, toss the empty tray back in, and violently slam the heavy lid. You just spent several long minutes broadcasting a continuous, highly unnatural metallic scraping noise straight into the water column. It is exactly like scratching a chalkboard in a completely quiet library. Every single fish in the vicinity is now acutely aware of your heavy presence. You honestly think you are just creatively changing a lure to match the hatch, but in harsh reality, you are loudly ringing a massive alarm bell. You are loudly changing lures to try and catch more fish, but the physical act itself just ruined your chances. Your choice of shoreline matters immensely. The specific type of bank you are actively fishing on plays a truly huge role in exactly how much noise you are actually transmitting. Not all ground is created exactly equal. If you are lightly walking on soft sand or thick marshy grass, the earth actually absorbs a lot of the kinetic energy. It absorbs the shock from your heavy footsteps and your dropped gear. The soft ground acts exactly like a sponge, deeply dampening the vibrations before they ever hit the water. But most of us simply do not fish on perfect, soft green grass. We frequently fish off solid concrete boat ramps, massive rocky dams, hard-packed dirt trails, and rough gravel shorelines. These hard surfaces are absolute acoustic nightmares for anglers. They are solid, incredibly dense materials that transfer energy flawlessly. When you drop a plastic box on a rough, rocky shore, the vibration clearly travels through the rocks and straight into the water with almost zero loss of energy. The harder the ground, the more incredibly careful you have to be. If you are firmly standing on a concrete pier or a rocky dam, you desperately need to treat your gear like it is made of fragile glass. Watch the elite anglers closely. Have you ever closely noticed that there is always that one specific guy who seems to effortlessly catch fish absolutely everywhere he goes? He even catches giants on heavily pressured public waters. You closely watch him from down the bank, furiously trying to figure out his hidden secret. You truly think he has some magical live bait or a highly secret garlic scent, but if you really pay close attention to the elite bank anglers, you will finally notice something entirely different. It is their physical movement. They move exactly like natural predators. They absolutely do not march loudly down to the water edge. They walk incredibly softly. They deliberately set their gear down far away from the water. They absolutely do not rummage loudly through their bags. Their actions are totally smooth, highly deliberate, and perfectly quiet. They deeply understand that fishing is exactly like hunting. You would never go deer hunting and start loudly slamming car doors and vigorously rattling plastic boxes in the middle of the quiet woods. Elite anglers treat the shoreline with the exact same immense respect. They fully know that acoustic stealth is their single greatest weapon. They catch the fish that you just loudly scared away. So, how do we solve this gear problem? So how exactly do we finally fix this massive acoustic problem? It clearly starts with completely rethinking exactly how you carry your fishing gear. The traditional, loud, hard plastic tackle box desperately needs to be left permanently in the garage. It is an outdated, incredibly noisy piece of plastic that actively works against your success. The truly modern solution is using soft fabric tackle bags. A soft fabric backpack or a comfortable shoulder bag naturally absorbs heavy sound. When you finally set a fabric bag down on a hard rock, there is zero sharp impact. It is just a very soft, quiet thud. Inside that bag, you still have to use small plastic trays to safely hold your sharp lures, but the thick fabric safely surrounding them heavily dampens the plastic rattle. Some deeply serious anglers go even further. They smartly line the bottom of their plastic trays with very thin craft foam. When a heavy lead jig sharply drops into the tray, it softly hits the foam instead of the hard plastic. No loud click, no sharp scrape, no warning noise. It is a tiny modification that takes 10 minutes at home, but it totally silences your setup. We have all felt this absolute frustration. We have all painfully lived this exact frustrating scenario. You are actively fishing a very long stretch of public bank. You have been standing there for 3 long hours. You have carefully changed your bait 5 different times. You have loudly opened and closed your squeaky tackle box 20 times. You have heavily paced back and forth on the loose gravel. You have not had a single tiny bite. Then a totally new guy casually walks down the bank. He quietly stops about 40 yards away from you. He has exactly 1 rod in his hand and a tiny, soft pouch heavily strapped to his belt. He slowly sneaks up to the water edge, makes 1 quiet cast parallel to the shore, and instantly hooks a massive bass. You just stand there in absolute furious disbelief. You strongly blame your terrible luck. You wrongly blame the color of your expensive lure. But the harsh reality is staring you right in the very face. That quiet guy caught a fish because he smoothly entered a zone that had not been heavily bombarded with mechanical noise. You are currently sitting in a dead zone of your very own creation. Stop treating the bank like a workbench. Another truly huge mistake we frequently make is treating the natural riverbank like it is our personal garage workbench. We aggressively bring hundreds of lures, miles of fishing line, and giant heavy toolboxes. We firmly decide to completely re-rig our entire setups right there on the actual water. We are loudly clipping line, dropping heavy weights, deeply digging through trays, and loudly organizing our gear. And we do all this while standing exactly 2 feet from where we expect a big fish to bite. This is an absolutely terrible strategy. All of your noisy, complicated preparation desperately needs to happen at home. Before you ever leave your warm house, you should know exactly what 3 or 4 specific lures you're going to actually use first. Tie your favorite rig on while you are comfortably sitting in your living room. Put your immediate essentials directly in your pockets or in a small, quiet hip pouch. When you finally arrive at the water, your only job should be to quietly unhook your bait and cast. You should not have to loudly open a single box for at least the first full hour of fishing. This requires a total psychological reset. Making this critical change requires a massive, complete psychological shift. We are entirely too used to the highly casual, heavily relaxed nature of modern fishing. We carelessly treat the bank like it is a weekend picnic spot. We bring loud folding chairs that sharply squeak, heavy metal coolers that slam shut, and big, hollow plastic boxes. We have to completely stop treating fishing like a casual spectator sport. We must start treating it exactly like a highly tactical operation. You are actively trying to outsmart a wild, surviving animal in its very own environment. That specific animal has beautifully evolved over millions of years to perfectly detect exactly the kinds of unnatural noises you are making. When you step quietly out of your truck, the real hunt immediately begins. Your entire mindset simply needs to shift to total stealth. Walk softly on your toes. Place your heavy things down very gently. Speak only in very low tones. Communicate quietly with your fishing buddies without shouting loudly across the open water. When you finally adopt this deeply predatory mindset, your entire experience on the water completely changes. You stop being a noisy intruder and become a ghost. The ultimate takeaway is taking control. The absolute ultimate realization here is entirely about taking control. There are incredibly many things in fishing that you simply cannot ever control. You cannot control the dropping barometric pressure. You cannot control the shifting wind direction, the cold water temperature, or the dark phase of the moon. You cannot magically force a fish to be extremely hungry, but the one single thing you have absolute 100% control over is the exact amount of noise you actively make. You completely control your own footsteps. You control your choice of gear. You entirely control your acoustic footprint. By finally eliminating the sharp rattle of that plastic tackle box, you are completely removing one of the biggest negative variables from the entire equation. You are instantly putting yourself massively ahead of 90% of the other casual anglers on the water. They will continually stomp around, loudly slam their boxes, and loudly complain that the fish are absolutely not biting today. Let them make all the noise. You now clearly know the secret of the truly silent approach. You know that you must respect the water and silence your gear. Let us quickly wrap this up. Silence on the bank is not just about keeping your mouth shut. It is completely about controlling the mechanical vibrations you send into the earth. The biggest twist here is that your highly expensive tackle box, the very tool proudly holding your best baits, is exactly what is repelling the fish away from your spot. Once you deeply understand that water amplifies your physical mistakes instead of hiding them, you will never fish the exact same way again. Drop the hard plastic, switch to soft bags, and start hunting quietly. Thank you so much for watching. If this changes the way you look at your gear, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like on the video. Now I have a big question for you. What is the absolute loudest piece of gear you own? And are you finally going to leave it at home next time? Drop a comment below and let us get the discussion started.